Hey, it's Justin Goff, and today I have Scott Mills with me. Scott's a member of our Copy Accelerator program, and he's also an incredible copywriter. So Scott actually went from being a teacher to a pastor to losing everything in the real estate crash of '08, '09, to now being a copywriter who makes anywhere between 25, 30, 40 grand a month on average. Um, it's a pretty amazing story. So I'm going to talk to him a little bit about that today. One of the reasons I really wanted to bring Scott on is he's made a huge jump in his income as a freelance copywriter over the last 2 years. So we're going to tap into kind of how he did that and kind of how he got started because, like a lot of people, Scott did not grow up dreaming of being a direct response copywriter. I think everybody in this industry kind of just falls into it,
Yeah.
or somehow just backdoors into it, like a lot of us did. Scott's kind of no exception to that. Like I said, being a teacher and a pastor before he got into this. So we're going to dig into that. A little bit about Scott. So he's written for a lot of the biggest clients in health, survival, golf, companies like V-Shred, who's in our mastermind, Sava Brothers, who run a really big survival business, guys like that. So he's written for multiple niches. Like I said, he's one of the there's very few copywriters who consistently are making 20, 30, $40,000 a month. For all the people that might talk like they are on on Facebook, the reality of the actual number of people that do that is a lot less. But Scott is one of them, so I'm hoping we'll get some good stuff out here. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Justin, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I feel honored that you asked me to be on here.
Let's dig into, like you said. So before the call, you kind of mentioned, so you were a public school teacher, then
Yeah.
you were a pastor, and then you kind of lost everything. Tell us that story because it's quite fascinating.
Yeah. So number one, I'm quite a bit older than I may look. I'm actually 53, and a lot of people are surprised by that, but which means I've just seen a lot of life. You know, sometimes it's felt like I've been, rode hard and put away wet. But yeah, I initially right out of college in the late 80s, I went into public high school teaching. I was an English teacher, loved the classroom. I love teaching writing. I loved teaching stories. I loved all of that stuff. But about 4 or 5 years in, I really felt inclined to go into full-time ministry from the church that I was part of. So I did. I left the teaching career behind. I planted a church in a little tiny town outside of Eugene, Oregon, called Pleasant Hill, and was there for about 4 or 5 years. And things went really great, but then our kids were getting a little bit older, and my in-laws were also getting a little bit older, and they lived down in California in the Central Valley area, town called Modesto, also known as not affectionately as Meth Desto. It's kind of the methamphetamine capital of the West Coast. It's crazy. But so we relocated in '99 down to Modesto. I started another church, and things went pretty well there for a while. But then I kind of just hit some kind of crazy personal wall. At first, I thought I was burnout, but later on, I realized that I had just a shit ton of unresolved childhood trauma. Kind of a similar story to what you've shared before, Justin, with your mom. My mom was mentally ill and kind of grew up in a really, really dysfunctional way, and for decades, right? I had no idea how unhealthy I was inside. I had no idea just how messed up I was. And so it kind of came to a head where I just was just fried. And so I stepped away from full-time work and really thought my life had ended. I spent, weeks, months almost every night crying myself to sleep because I just felt like such an utter, abject, complete failure as a man, as a husband, as a father. It was really, really brutal. And about right around the same time is when the whole market crashed. And so at the time, it's kind of crazy. I was on a pastor salary, so I wasn't making a ton of money, but my wife was in the real estate business. And so she was actually making probably double what I was making at the time. And so we built this great big beautiful house with a huge swimming pool, and it was wonderful. And then when the crash hit, she lost her job, she lost her income, and we held on for about a year, but then eventually it all went away. And so we gave the house back to the bank. And then my daughter got married. And in order to pay for the wedding that she wanted, I ended up having to sell my truck to finance it. So I sold that to kind of pay off the caterer and the photographer and the videographer. It was a $10,000 truck, and I sold it all. So the day after my daughter's wedding, I didn't have a real job. I was trying all kinds of things to try and make money. But I had $32 in the bank in the savings account the day after my daughter's wedding. So at that point, I started just kind of doing some, I guess you'd call it social media marketing back then. This was kind of back when you could kind of do anything you wanted on Facebook. So I helped a few local businesses create some contests to launch their businesses, and those went fairly well. But it still wasn't near enough of an income. So I ended up taking a sales job. I was selling, working out of the Bay Area, commuting about 2 to 3 hours each way from Modesto into the Bay Area. Bay Area traffic is just crazy. So I was selling, big dollar backyards, like big pergolas and paver patios and custom barbecues, and actually ended up doing fairly well with that. But then me and my family realized we need to get back to Oregon, need to get out of Modesto. It was kind of a toxic environment at that point. So we moved back up to Oregon, and I left that job behind. And that's ultimately kind of how I found internet marketing. I was helping a local cleaning company here in Southern Oregon with their social media marketing. They were redoing their website. So I said I'd help them do all the writing for it. Because I was an English teacher, so this is something I can do, right? I can put words together. So I was like, okay, I can write, but I don't know anything about writing for the website or whatever. So I looked up copywriting. Somehow I found Cult of Copy on Facebook. Joined there. I think that's where I first got exposed to you. This is like 2016. Started doing some, when I first started, I was just doing anything and everything. Landing pages, emails. I had some great first clients. I had some terrible, shitty first clients. People that didn't pay me, people that took advantage of me. I'll pay you $500, but there's all this work behind it, and that never. It's like, the classic bait and switch. But so eventually I teamed up with another copywriter. He was a little bit of a mentor to me. Is that George? Yeah. He was a little bit of a mentor to me. That relationship kind of went a little bit wacky toward the end, which just, these things happen in business, I suppose. So it was about 2017 that I really kind of started out on my own completely as a copywriter. I think 2017 is actually when I first wrote for Dan and Tim Reese that are part of the group. And actually, you know what? I said, you guys need to be part of whatever Justin's doing. So
Was that one of your first clients, Dan and Tim?
Yeah, they were one of the first clients I had after I separated from this other copywriter. Yeah.
Let's go back to kind of picking up your first client, because this is always a big thing for new copywriters. I would say like getting the first client is the hardest, because you really don't have anything to prove that you know what the hell you're doing. Did you get your first client from Cult to Copy?
Yeah, I did. I just made posts and offered, created my own offers and created packages, and I still remember some of them, and they were fun. And probably 2 or 3 years ago, there were still some pretty solid business owners that were, getting copywriters from that group. There doesn't seem to be as many high level clients in that group now, which is one of the reasons I'm really thankful for Copy Accelerator, because that job group is amazing. The high paying copy jobs board has literally paid for my Copy Accelerator membership several times over. So
awesome.
Yeah, fantastic.
Let's all right. So your story is really interesting. I mean, I'm curious about being an English teacher, because a lot of people would actually look at that as an advantage. Like, you really understand writing. Me as a copywriter, I actually probably would look at it as a disadvantage for a lot of people, because writing maybe if you're writing novels, like that would help, but like understanding the grammar and syntax and stuff like that in terms of writing is like 5% of copywriting. It's the emotion and the selling that really is what matters. So I'm curious, like, from your standpoint, do you think it helped you? Do you think it hindered you?
I think the way it helped me is, first of all, it gave me some confidence that I could do this. It's like, shit, I know how to put sentences together. I know how to do a beginning, a middle, and an end. But there were a lot of things that it did actually hurt me, in that just unlearning some of the things that are important in writing an essay are just not, they're not important, right? And so, there's been a lot that I've had to unlearn in that way. But I think that the other part is, if you're standing in front of 35 freshman high school students, most of them don't want to be there, right? And most of them don't want to listen to what you're saying. So I think the advantage was being able to connect with a group. I generally had a fairly good sense of when I was connecting and when I wasn't. Same in my work as a pastor. Is the stories, the things that become memorable in somebody's mind. Those are the things that being a teacher, being a pastor, I think were the best things that I was able to transfer over to being a copywriter. As far as writing, not so much. So those are the things that were most helpful.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because I mean, copy is really all about holding people's attention, and trying to hold the attention of a group of ninth graders is it's not very easy.
It's downright terrifying sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the second you're boring, they are thinking of something else.
They're out.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really important copy principle too, for anybody listening, that when someone is reading your sales letter or watching your VSL, you are competing with Instagram, you're competing with the messages that come in on their iPhone, you're competing with their email. So if you write 10 seconds of boring copy, the brain just checks out and they're gone, and they're on to something else.
Yeah.
That's one of those things too that's just getting worse and worse. It ain't gonna get any better. People's attention spans are just nothing anymore. So
so true.
you can't write 5 sentences of boring copy anymore and like
Yeah.
have someone keep reading, because it's just there's too much other stuff they could be doing.
Yeah, I was just I'm writing a sales letter for an immunity project, and you know, trying to explain the immune system, so that a fourth grader could understand it. So I was like, told my wife, I said, "Hey, come read this," and she's like, "Yeah, these 4 sentences right here, really dry. You need to do something because I lost you right there." It's like, yeah.
That's a great tip that a lot of people talk about copy wise, but not a lot of people actually do, is have someone else flat out read it, print it out, have them read it. And like one of the things Agora talks about is their Cub method, which is anything that's confusing. I forget. It was confusing, not believable, and something else.
Mm-hmm.
So just circle those and just let me know when you're reading through it.
Right.
And like you said, that matters a lot, because if you're trying to explain something with health and something that's going on with the lungs or something, and you're explaining it to me in a level where you think like, I don't know, at a 12th grade level, your average person is not going to understand it.
Right.
You have to explain it in a way that you would to a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And it has to be, like you said, it has to still be kind of entertaining. And a lot of people
Yeah.
let those parts get pretty dry, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's been a hard thing. That's been one of the harder things for me to kind of tone down, is because I get excited about like the intricacies of it, and it's oftentimes in the intricacy that you find what's really unique about the immune system. And so it's been really it's been one of the things that I've learned from both you and Stefan is the delicate line between finding what's really unique about the immune system, or whatever, beauty or whatever, but then not going so deep that you get lost in the weeds. Because as copywriters, we have to be really fascinated and curious about the things that we're learning about. I think if you're a copywriter and you're not curious about the world, if you're not an innate learner, you're kind of toast. But I'm learning to like do the deep dive and then hack about 95% of it off, till you just find that one little thread that is interesting, that is unique, that nobody else is writing about. That's that's really the biggest challenge.
That's a really great point. I remember when I read Joe Sugarman's book many, many years ago when I started copywriting. He pointed out that the best copywriters are just naturally very curious people. And it is one of those things that I've come to see among like copywriters are like, I'm very weird in the sense that I read like books on psychology and like the female brain and the male brain and why women talk one way and men talk. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a whole lot of like application in daily life besides like improving a relationship, but
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that type of stuff is super interesting. And I know like Stefan reads like World War II novels and stuff about General Patton and whoever else, and just because he's super curious about that kind of stuff. And that is a really, really good trait for a copywriter, because being able to dig down into, like you said, that 100% of it and find the little nugget, find the needle in the haystack and be like, oh, this is super interesting.
Yeah.
This is the part I'm going to write about.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to pull back to, so when you started out copywriting, those first couple jobs you got, let's say on Cult to Copy, how much were you charging for that stuff?
Oh goodness. I think right away for a sales letter, I was charging $5,000.
Wow.
Mostly because I was just looking around and seeing what other guys were charging. Carlos Redlick was, in there at about the same time, and he was, that's what he was charging. So I was like, shit, I'll just do the same thing. I don't think I ever get hired to do a $5,000 sales letter. So most of my first jobs were like landing pages and emails. I think probably my first legit, fairly big job was was an email launch sequence for a personal development guy that was kind of doing product launch formula, Jeff Walker style thing. So I just wrote a shit ton of emails. There were like 20 emails in this product launch formula thing. So that was one of my first big jobs. And then I did with the other partner that I had. I think we were charging about 12 to 15 for a sales letter that we split. So I think I was pretty fortunate early on. I didn't have to do too many of the, do a ton of work for not much money. So that was, I was definitely fortunate in that way. So for the most part, I felt like I've been paid fairly well for the work.
Yeah, you have. I mean, I started out, I think my first sales letter, I probably charged, I want to say $250 maybe for a real like sales letter.
Yeah, I just didn't know any better. Just like, well, that's what everybody else is, charging, and I feel like I can write as well as these guys. So if somebody wants to hire me for $5,000, I'll do it.
Yeah, good for you, man. Smart. That's funny. Yeah, and I know Stefan. I think Stefan's first one he ever wrote was for Warrior Forum, and he charged like $149.
Yeah, that's great.
That's just insane to me now to think like he probably wrote a 25 page sales letter for $149.
Man.
But I mean, in the beginning though, you do have to kind of like slog a little bit and like you got to get the reps under your belt, and you got to get those first like couple clients. And you got, because you can't, I mean, it's the one thing I always talk about with copywriting, like you can't shortcut the process to being a better writer without writing. You have to write. You can't just keep reading books. You can't just keep taking courses. Like you have to actually write. It's the only way to get better. And I mean, as long as you're getting paid for it, like one of my recommendations always is for newer writers is to really try to compete in an area where you're not going head to head against guys like you and Stefan and writers for Agora and stuff. You don't want to be in those niches really when you're like first starting out. Like one of the things I always recommend is go do a direct mail letter for like a local dentist and get him like patients coming in for, I don't know, a teeth whitening procedure or whatever.
Right.
Because in that situation, you're competing against other dentists. Like,
right.
You don't have to be very damn good to beat other dentists at marketing. But if you're writing for, I don't know, some email list that's competing against the BioTrusts and the Native Paths and the B-Shreds of the world, you got to be pretty damn good. Okay, so let's turn to kind of more recent. So you came to our event, our Copy Accelerator event, first one. You wound up joining the mastermind. I know you mentioned your copywriting income before that was somewhere around 10 to maybe 12 grand a year. Now it's probably averages somewhere around 25 grand a month, or not a year, sorry, a month. Now it averages probably around 25 grand a month. So among like freelance copywriters out there, you're definitely probably in the top, I don't know, 1 to 5% of that for sure. What would you say is kind of the big thing that helped you jump there? Is it better clients? Is it simply just getting paid more per project? Is it doing more projects? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is just being able to do more projects in less amount of time, and then actually getting some bonus payments on performance. So obviously the RMBC method has been a game changer for me, because before I was always kind of picking and choosing, what kind of format I was going to follow. And then once I got into it, I typically just felt lost. And usually because I'm really about stories and love to tell the story inside the sales letter, I think I just got lost in the stories and would tell the story too much and rely on the story instead of selling, if that makes sense. So so yeah, following Stefan's RMBC method, and not feeling like I need to reinvent something and be all original, right? that's been the biggest game changer. So
so essentially cutting down the time to create. What were you at kind of before ballpark to write a sales letter?
about a month.
Okay, and where are you at now?
About a week.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Yeah, so I'm about halfway finished with this immunity one. I mean, I kind of last week I was finishing up probably 3 or 4 projects, some upsell projects, and some leads, and finally just kind of cleared my plate. So let's see, it's Thursday, so I really actually started research on Monday, and then did my brief on Wednesday, and then started writing today. And I'll be finished with the rough draft either tonight, depends on how aggressive I want to get tonight, but I'll definitely finish it tomorrow. And then over the weekend, I'll write the 2 upsells, because obviously this is, who knows how long the immunity craze will last. I mean, this is really kind of an urgent thing. So I think beginning to end, it'll be a week, including the 2 upsells.
Wow, that's pretty damn good. One thing I want to touch on, which I think would be really helpful for copywriters, you mentioned not only getting better clients, but getting some performance-based stuff in with your, and this is something I always talk about with a lot of copywriters that are at your level or at the, when they're hitting the 6-figure level, they kind of hit a ceiling because they're let's say charging 10 grand for a sales letter or 15 grand for a sales letter, and they're not getting any royalties or performance or back end, and you're just hitting a ceiling. I mean, you only got so many hours in the day. You can only write so many promos in a year, and you're going to hit that ceiling. So one of the easiest ways to get above that is to really get some type of performance, some type of royalty. So, and if you write something that crushes, and let's say you're getting $1 per sale, and this thing's doing 1,000 sales a day, that's a nice little monthly payment coming in.
Yeah. I still haven't written that one that crushes yet. I've written a few that have come, converted, but not quite scalable. I'm hoping this immunity one will do well, because I have a pretty, I'm not taking anything on the front for it at all. So it's completely speculative.
Oh,
that's
nice.
actually that's actually kind of an interesting little thing to mention is I wasted a ton of time on speculative projects, like just working for free for a big payoff in the end. And if they didn't come, then I wasted months on projects that never went anywhere, people that never launched or for whatever reason. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm really glad I married a brilliant woman, because at some point she said, I don't mind the speculative projects. It's okay to have those, but let's limit how many of those because you can't just give an entire 3 or 4 weeks not get paid for something. So
smart woman.
So I've become way more strategic about when I do something that's speculative that I don't know what kind of what it's going to have in terms of a payout. So this is definitely one of those where it's like if this thing hits, it could be really fantastic.
Yeah, I'm the same way on those. Like I'll do performance-based things with certain clients, like when I'm redoing their upsells and stuff like that on a kind of, if I beat your control and get you a, I don't know, $3 or $4 average order value boost, you're going to pay me X amount. And those work really well, but there's only a handful of clients who I'll do them with. It's people I know who are going to implement right away and who I trust to test it correctly and who I know and who I trust to pay me based on the results. Because like you said, you're the one putting in all the work. But it is worth it in certain situations, especially with these people that can really scale. And it's a good way to go too for like a newer copywriter who you might not have a name and they're not going to fork over 10 grand to have you
Yeah.
write something.
Yeah.
But
Or, you know, if your monthly obligations are such that, you know, you can kind of get away with, you know, with that kind of thing, that's great. You know, if you have kids and a mortgage and car payment, that's gets a little bit more complicated for some guys and gals, I think.
yeah. All right. So a couple more questions I got here for you. In terms of your actual writing or your kind of career as a copywriter, what would you say has kind of been your biggest struggle? I mean, and that could be either something tactical in terms of your writing, or that could be maybe something that's more mental, emotional when it comes to actually writing. I'd be kind of curious to hear.
Yeah, I think for a stretch, one of the biggest challenges was just getting data. I did a lot of writing, but did not get a lot of data back. Either people not launching or people launching and just, you know, not really communicating in spite of my best efforts to find out what was going on. And I think that, you know, you and Stefan have, you know, really communicated really well that you shape a winning offer. You don't necessarily like just craft it, you know, right out of the gate. That happens sometimes, but usually it just takes a team of people that have the data and are working together to figure out what's going on. So I'd say early on there were things that I wrote that had promise, but without the data and the feedback and the ability to go back and you know, optimize it. They're just, I feel like that kind of held me back a little bit a couple of years ago.
That's a big point. I want to make sure people grasp that, because I know numerous copywriters who have been writing copy for 10 years, who are freelancers, who have never seen data on anything they've written. And it's really hard to get better when you don't know what's working and what's not working. Because I mean, you can guess what you thought was the best, but none of that really fucking matters. I mean, what actually matters is which one's working when they're putting real traffic on it and it's making real sales. I mean, I've mentioned that a lot. One of the cool things with like email, if you're testing 4 emails a day and you get to see, okay, this emotional story on email really worked, or this like super fear-based angle really worked. If you're doing that every day, like very, very quickly, you're going to have a good idea of like, all right, here's the 3 or 4 things that just work like clockwork.
Right.
And you've kind of cracked the code. You don't have to like, you just focus on those things. You don't have to like focus on anything else. That's a huge point.
There was a season where I was like, because I got into writing sales, you know, full-length sales letters pretty quickly. But I love how you encourage, you know, people that are just getting started to start with email, because you get data so fast and you can improve quickly because of that data. But there was a while that even though I was writing these sales letters and not getting data, I was like, shit, I'm just gonna start writing emails, because I can at least get data. And you know, one of the things that can be a struggle, at least for me, during writing a sales letter, at least the way I used to do it. This is not the case anymore now that RNBC has saved my life. And that is, you know, you get in, you know, 2 or 3 weeks in and just kind of feel lost and discouraged and just kind of feel like I really don't know where to go. I've got all this stuff and I'm trying to shove all this into this, you know, thing that's supposed to make money. So yeah, I'd say that getting lost inside of a big project was a struggle for a while, but I haven't felt like that for the last probably 2 or 3 projects where I really followed the process almost anally. You know what I mean? Just and that's actually one of the things that Stefan really encouraged me to do, is just like, you know what? I feel like you're using RMBC, but you still got too much of how you used to do things. So just get rid of everything that you used to do and just follow this and let's see what happens. So, so that's been a few of the struggles that I've had over the last couple of years.
Nice. All right. So one thing I want to dive into is, I love asking the question, what do you know now kind of about copywriting that you wish you would have known when you started? You've obviously come a long way from where you started. You're, like I said, you're doing better than 95% of freelance copywriters out there. I'd be curious to know when you started back in 2016, some stuff you wish you would have known that you kind of really grasp now.
Yeah. So I think we've already covered some of it. It's just getting data on your writing. I would also say getting a mentor and investing in yourself. That was a really, really hard thing for me to overcome because I've always been just like a bootstrap kind of guy.
Me too.
Just like learn everything free that you possibly can. And I think part of that is that, just not valuing myself. I think that was part of my, mindset that was so broken. That I didn't think I was worth it, right? It was worth sending my kids to college, but it wasn't worth, investing in a mentor or a copywriting course. Honestly, before I joined Copy Accelerator, the only thing that I had purchased up until last September was probably about $150 worth of Cult of Copy trainings. So that's that's how much I invested in myself, the first couple of years.
That's pretty impressive that you made it that far without really like buying a bunch of courses and stuff.
Yeah, I bought nothing.
Wow.
And part of it was, it was, my wife was going back to school. She was, finishing her degree. My oldest kiddo's 28 and my youngest is 22. So we've got, there's just all this activity and all these responsibilities. So, so when I was at that event, I knew it was coming. I went to the event knowing that, joining was coming. I was just like, I got to do this. Like, I can't not do this. I've got to invest in getting better.
Awesome, man. Funny enough, you were actually one of the ones before the event. Me and Stefan kind of put together a list of like people were like, these we just know that would be a great fit because you reminded us so much of Randall, and I was like, you're kind of in the same spot where like Randall was, where I feel like the right mentorship is going to really take you to that next level. And that's kind of really what's happened because your copy's gotten so much better. Your income's pretty much kind of doubled. And I mean, you could see it too in your writing. Just, I know from what stuff you posted at the beginning of the group to now, like it's like a night and day difference.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that everybody has to overcome in terms of getting mentorship or getting people to give you feedback on your work is just overcoming that insecurity of, and that was, fairly terrifying. And part of that is, you and I having that same, that work represented my identity rather than something that was outside of me. That was just, I mean, it's still hard. And anytime I still post, even if I feel good about it, my finger hovers on that mouse. And it's just like, okay, I'm sending this out to 130 other people. And by doing so, I'm exposing, I may be exposing what an idiot I am, right? Those thoughts are still kind of there in a lot of ways. But I would say that's those things of, getting data, investing in myself, investing in a mentor, getting people that really are invested in you getting better. That's been the rocket fuel. And Randall and I definitely are, we had some great conversations leading up to the Las Vegas event. And interestingly, he and I both have a similar goal that by the end of the year, our income goal is $100,000 a month. So that's, we kind of figured out that you can't really do that unless you're Stefan, you can't really do that only as a freelance copywriter. It's going to be, creating our own offers, right? So he's working on something and I'm working on something. So that's, by the end of the year, that's we're kind of encouraging each other on to get to that $100,000 a month mark. So it's pretty,
Awesome.
pretty aggressive. Sometimes I think, oh shit, it's never going to happen. But then other months I'm like, yeah, absolutely, it's going to happen. So.
Awesome, man. I would love to see both of you do it. I think both of you got the copy chops and the marketing chops to do it. So I would not be surprised if you guys do it.
And we're the old guys, right?
Yeah, well, you look like you're the same age as me, so cool, man. So let's wrap this up. The last thing I kind of want to end with is really, you've talked a lot about Copy Accelerator. I know it's been a big help for you. So anyone who's, let's say, watching this, who might be thinking about joining, who might wonder if they're a fit, what would you kind of tell them about it?
To me, it's a no-brainer, an absolute no-brainer. The kind of instruction that we get every single week, the access to you and Stefan and others, the level of the group just keeps elevating. It's really truly mind-blowing. So that, and then the reviews of copy, it's priceless. And then for a freelancer, being able to have access to the jobs board is a game changer. So goodness, yeah, I thought, when the opportunity at Vegas came to sign up, it was like, it was a no-brainer. It was just like, I've got to do this. This is the most money I've ever spent on myself. But it's paid off in spades, 1,000 times. I have to check that out. I was wondering, I should do that. I should actually count up my ROI, how much income I can trace directly back to Copy Accelerator.
It's funny that you say that because I had the same thing with coaching. Like, I was always of the mindset, I can figure this out on my own. I don't need anybody's help. And then when I hired David Deutsch to be my coach in like 2014, like my income just hockey sticked and my copy got so much better, and all the shit that thought I knew about copywriting was just shattered because this guy was just schooling me every week on like what I actually didn't know. Now I'm a big believer that the quickest way to get somewhere is hiring someone who's been there.
Absolutely.
Instead of you doing this zigzag path to get there, they're just like, nope, here's the line. Like, this is what you need to do.
Straight line. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool, man. This was a great interview. Let's say somebody's watching this and they want to get a hold of you or get in contact with you. What would be the best way? Facebook, email?
Yeah, Facebook is, I'm generally on a couple times a day. Or email too. Either way, it's all good.
Cool. So Scott Mills, Copy Accelerator member, freelance copywriter extraordinaire. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Really appreciate the time.